back up with a 30-second warning, and they will make their way back down. They will be descending via parachute, so we are looking for full inflation with those parachutes. Once they land, and by the way, the booster will land on a landing pad in a specific location. The crew capsule will land somewhere in the area. Now, they know where they think it's going to land. They have a bunch of vehicles, I believe it's those Rivian trucks, stationed on a grid pattern, and they are all ready to zoom in to retrieve Jeff Bezos and his crew as soon as that landing happens. We are taking bets on who will emerge first. I think Jeff Bezos is going to be the first to open that hatch, but John and Tom, I'm curious who you expect to see first.
Well, I would see Mrs. Funk ladies first to exit.
Well, that's the polite thing to do, but John, it was Jeff Bezos who was the first in the capsule, I think, so maybe he'll be the first to exit too.
John, at T-minus 2 minutes and plus here, I think it's important, as Mr. Stanovic mentioned, we have wind in Van Horn, and as Emily mentioned, there are 3 parachutes out in the oceans of Cape Canaveral and Cape Kennedy. This was always a very serious issue. Depending on where the astronauts came down in the water, it could be distant from an aircraft carrier.
Tom, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Let's do it again, because I always find this part the most fascinating. We're at T-minus 2 now. Then after the launch, we get the booster and the capsule, and they separate. And they separate at about 76 kilometers altitude. The capsule is going to go to about 106 kilometers. That's where they'll experience that zero gravity. They'll unstrap. They'll take in the curvature of the Earth. But that separation, Tom, and the booster returning to Earth, that is quite something to see.
Yeah, well, it's going to be something to see. And again, you're going to see 2 images up, folks, going up only 62 miles. I would hope that we will have camera images of not only the booster and the separated capsule at the same time, and then the return of the rocket, which, John, you and I mentioned, we're still not used to.
So 8 minutes after the launch, Tom, the reusable New Shepard booster should land. And I understand we should get some pictures of that, and we'll do... Tom, that vision, that view never gets old.
You can start to see.
And the speed here, John, is very, very important here. This is not orbital speed of 16, 17, 18,000 miles per hour, but nevertheless, thrust to get up into space well over 1,000 miles per hour. And John, the feet being added here out to the 62-mile point. We have passed the point of the great physics tension of the rocket and the capsule, now waiting for that separation.
The separation set to take place in its entirety, Tom, in about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Let's head back to Emily Chang to walk us through the next 10 minutes or so. Emily.
All right, John, so look, on the left-hand corner of your screen, you see the countdown clock, the speed going down. When that gets to 0, that is the peak of the flight, or apogee, as they say in the space industry. That is when they will be feeling those 3 to 4 minutes of weightlessness, and immediately after it hits 0, the speed starts going back up as that crew capsule starts going back down. So there we are at 0. It's happened. The capsule has reached apogee. We imagine Jeff Bezos and his crew are floating around weightless inside that capsule right now, and that they are all feeling that is so coveted, so rare, that so few humans have felt. Now, you're going to see the booster coming down first. So the lower portion of your screen, that will be the booster descending back to Earth. The crew capsule will descend after that. John and Tom?
An original image, John, something I'm still not used to, a booster of a lighter color in the capsule, a brighter white, separating apart as they come up to apogee, or I should say coming down. And John, it's just an absolutely original idea. No one thought of this Mercury, Gemini, Apollo.
Just absolutely stunning, Tom. And I say it completes in about 3 minutes' time. That's when the reusable New Shepard booster actually lands back down on Earth. And then we get the experience that I think everyone who goes in space wants to see. We know the cost of it for Virgin Galactic, Tom. It's about 200K, 250K. We still don't know what this is going to cost people if they would like to follow in the footsteps of Jeff Bezos and the other three.
You know, I got to admit, you're 1 minute warning and you're on a Boeing flight over to LHR and they tell you to get back in your seat and buckle up. This is a little more important, John.
Tom, I've got to say, this is a little bit different to the transatlantic flight that you and I would take. Let's head back in and take a listen to the events as they unfold.
2,000 miles an hour. Everybody in?
First status check. Astronaut Oliver.
Oh, wow. Oliver, status check. Oh, sorry. Blue Control, Oliver, status perfect. In
Copy, Astronaut Wally.
Wally. Blue Control, Wally is in seat.
Copy, Astronaut Demo.
Astronaut demo, in my seat.
Copy, Astronaut Bezos. Copy.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us live for our first.
And you heard it right there, Tom. Astronaut Bezos, astronaut Wally, astronaut Damon, and the returning of the booster, the New Shepard booster returning back to Earth, Tom. You can see the coming back down to Earth in about the next 50 seconds. That should be landing, Tom.
On radio, it's just absolutely extraordinary. The flames now hitting on the ground, the booster landing here. I will have to see where it is in the market. Looks pretty good right now. John, let's let the smoke clear before we go back to Emily Chang to be sure. Yeah, look at that.
Booster
John.
touchdown, Tom.
It's just amazing.
It's phenomenal, isn't it?
It's like parallel parking on Fifth Avenue. Some can do it and some
look, to be honest, you and I can't do it. Let's confirm that right here for our audience. Emily Chang, let's bring you back into the conversation. The reusable New Shepard booster is back on Earth. Just walk us through what's taking place right now in the capsule.
The booster is back on Earth, and as it was coming down, we heard that sonic boom that we knew we would hear if everything was going right. It landed safely the way it was supposed to on the launch pad, and it looks like it's ready to go back up there. John, the key is reusability, bringing that cost down, using these rockets over and over again. When that booster landed, we heard cheers from the crowd. You've got a lot of devoted people, employees who have been working here for years, watching this, and now we are watching that crew capsule float on down. Those are the drogue parachutes, the small parachutes that are used especially for vehicles at very, very high velocity. They're designed to slow that capsule down as it speeds back towards Earth, and these are the main parachutes. We're looking for full inflation here of the main parachutes that will slow the capsule down as it approaches Earth to bring it in for a safe landing. The retro thrust system will kick in, basically pushing out a cloud of air below the capsule, and we expect it to land in a cloud of desert dust. Look at that, it's getting closer and closer to the ground, just 1,600 feet above the ground right now. You can imagine this is the culmination of a live stream for Jeff Bezos, for Wally Funk, as John, you've been talking about, an icon of aviation for Mark Bezos, Jeff Bezos' brother, and for 18-year-old Oliver Damon. There you see the crew capsule descending back to Earth. There are multiple vehicles on the ground in a grid pattern waiting to zoom in as soon as touchdown happens here.
Emily, thank you. That capsule, Tom Keene, 800 feet away.
That's just amazing to see. And of course, the debate of land versus sea 40 and 50, 60 years ago, and now routinely done on land. Let us listen in right now.
And it's touchdown. Capsule touchdown. Tom Keene, that looks successful to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I believe it is successful. Amazing to me, John, to see the speed of which they seem to be dropping, and yet a very gentle landing.
The hatch is due to open, Tom, I understand, in the next 10 minutes or so we might have to wait a little while to see who comes out of first. The picture's on your screen, though, for our audience worldwide. If you're listening on Bloomberg Radio, the booster successfully touching down. The capsule, so far at least from what we can see, successfully launching down. I believe you can hear from Jeff Bezos, so let's take a listen.
Copy, first step. You have a very heavy Capcom here as well. Let's do a status check. Astronaut Oliver.
Control, SF Oliver, status correct.
Copy. Astronaut. Copy. Astronaut demo.
Astronaut demo, I am unbelievably good.
Copy.
Blue Control, Bezos, best day ever.
Copy, everyone. Go ahead and remain in your seats. Crew member 7 is on their way. Shortly, you will hear the capsule off-gassing.
Did anybody have to start altitude or altitude? I didn't. Do we ask? No, they thought they had. We'll find out. It's okay. I had, my main mission was accomplished. I didn't kick anyone. That's fine. That was only about 5 minutes. Yeah.
Tom Keene, that looks like a successful mission. The astronauts checked in, the capsule successfully returning to land. That hatch is due to open in 5 or so minutes' time.
The capsule landing in the triangle of the 3 parachutes laid out on the Texas desert, or the plains, I guess I would call it, in the light green scrub. We say good morning on Bloomberg Radio, on television. It's just extraordinary images of a return to space. Chad Anderson with us, and a perfect time to speak to him as Blue Origin is gathered in celebration here. I guess a flawless mission is our first take. What does that signal for Mr. Bezos, for Mr. Musk? What does that signal for Chad Anderson?
I mean, they've been flawless since the beginning. This is their 16th flight, and they've all been flawless. It's really great to see. We now officially have 2 suborbital vehicles online that are taking humans to space. They're going to start doing so regularly. We have SpaceX is taking NASA to the space station. They have private missions lined up. Later this year, and this is a new era in human spaceflight.
Why is NASA focused on the efforts of Mr. Musk and not on those of Mr. Bezos?
Well, there's been a lot of comparison between Virgin Galactic and Bezos and Blue Origin, actually, but the ambitions of Blue Origin are much more aligned with SpaceX. This is the first step in what their, much larger ambition.
What does Mr. Musk learn from what we've seen this morning?
Well, I think he's wished them well, and I'm sure that he's happy to see this success happen. It's happened. He's been a leader in a number of other categories, in Tesla as well, and he's happy to see other electric vehicles coming online. I imagine he's got a similar sentiment here. One company does not make a market, and so it's great to see the increased competition driving further innovation.
Chad, let's go to John Farrow as we see the SUV pull up to the capsule, John.
2 vehicles approaching the capsule, 1 individual running towards it, Tom, just waving at the astronauts inside. They're going to open up that hatch any moment from now, Tom. Any moment now, that hatch will be opened.
So many of the memories here, folks, and it's not only Alan Shepard being yanked out of the ocean and Gus Grissom with a capsule going down into the ocean, but it's always an important mission. Now, I would assume, John, that the weightlessness issue here of the shuttle and the space station is not an issue. When you're up for 11 minutes, I mean, what can happen?
Tom, it certainly goes quickly, that's for sure. I can see Jeff Bezos inside reaching for his cowboy hat, Tom. I think that's going on right now as they go to open up that capsule. We were taking bets on who would exit first. Tom, who went in first? I think Jeff Bezos went in first, so I'm pretty sure that Mr. Bezos is going to be first out.
Did they come out and say, I'm going to Disneyland? I mean, is that part of the...
I don't think this is the Super Bowl, Tom. Tom, this is not the Super Bowl. Or the way some people have delivered the coverage of this, you'd expect it to be just as large. It's the what next of this, Tom. It's the what next of this. Well, this was the first time for this company. What next?
Craig, let's go. Chad, let's go. Excuse me. Chad, let's go to you quickly here. What is the next here that you observe?
I mean, there's going to be more of these flights. They've got more lined up. And interestingly, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where they price this thing, how many people are going. We know that 7,500 people put in bids in this auction, paying up to $28 million. And there was thousands of people who paid, you know, any variation. And so it'll be interesting to see where they end up, how Virgin responds, and where Blue Origin goes next.
John, let's describe the scene for radio here. We've got a mic up like they use for us on Bloomberg Surveillance to be sure they get it with tone, but certainly a different scene than anything I've seen from NASA before, John.
I can count 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals working on opening up that capsule, Tom. It's going to take a couple of moments, I think. You can just about see Jeff Bezos inside the capsule, waving around and giving a thumbs up as we wait for that to open up. I want to bring in our colleague, Emily Chang, as we await this moment. Emily, your thoughts on what's developed in the past hour?
John, Tom, I mean, we all have covered a lot of stories in our lives. Some of them are more memorable than others. I have to say, this is one for the history books. This is, it's hard not to get caught up in the energy and the history of this moment. I mean, it's one small step for Jeff Bezos, perhaps one giant leap for space tourism and space exploration. And the vision that Bezos has articulated goes so far beyond just people having a joyride in space. He has talked about building this road to space, the infrastructure that other entrepreneurs can build on. He's talked about the fact that when he started Amazon, you know, he didn't have to start new credit card systems. All of that was in place. We had a mail service that could deliver packages to you. Space, however, is much more undiscovered. There is no infrastructure. He wants to build that infrastructure so space entrepreneurs of the future can build a whole new generation of Amazons out there. And so it'll be interesting to see what he has to say as he steps off this flight and whether or not the experience has changed him or this vision at all. But you know, obviously this is a suborbital flight. Blue Origin working on orbital flights with the New Glenn. That will be their next big project. We spoke to a lead designer who said they're on track for that to be done before the end of next year. So who knows? Jeff Bezos could be up there again on an orbital flight. I
believe that hatch door is about to open any moment now to see who comes out of that capsule first. The astronauts inside are standing up. They're standing up, Tom, as we await that door to open, perhaps in the next couple of seconds.
They're going to descend down, John, and, you know, it's going to be a great moment. The stairs, John, frankly, look like the ones we have for the Gulfstream.
The hatch door has opened to the capsule, Tom. Exiting first is Jeff Bezos, donning that cowboy hat that he's been wearing over the last week or so, Tom. After him, the first teenager, the first human flight, the youngest ever astronaut there, Tom. And there you go. Tom, we keep talking about this moment. For the 82-year-old aviation icon, just phenomenal. And his brother, the last out of the capsule.
Gather around, I would say 40 or 50 people in the Texas desert. For those of you on Bloomberg Radio, it's being filmed. It will be part of their propaganda, if you will, of the further flights to be had. But what absolutely stuns me, John, is this truly appears to be absolute flawless execution.
Again, here a successful launch and landing of the New Shepard rocket and crew capsule with our first human flight crew there, Jeff Bezos, Mark Bezos, Oliver Damon, and Wally Funk. And their families there giving big hugs all around. What a moment, so much emotion from all of them. The elation. Did you see Wally? Did you see Wally when she came out? You know, this, I told you she was probably going to do a summer, cartwheel as she came out of that capsule. What an incredible, incredible day.
A successful mission for an S-16 for Jeff Bezos, Mark Bezos, Oliver Damon, and for Wally Funk. Emily Chang, to bring you back into the conversation, we keep talking about the what next of it. What have we achieved today that was not achieved 2 weekends ago?
John, I have to say, from everything that I could tell, this was an extremely successful mission. This was an opportunity for Jeff Bezos to demonstrate Blue Origin's technology to the world. This is after a 21-year journey. Delays, design changes, losing out on contracts, government contracts, important government contracts to SpaceX. And up to this point, SpaceX has very much been seen as the leader in this industry. SpaceX has orbital rockets and is already making trips to the International Space Station and taking astronauts there. This validates that Blue Origin has the capability, and you wonder, you have to assume certainly that the folks at NASA are watching, and you wonder if this changes something for NASA as well.
We welcome you all to our coverage with the markets opening. John, we have to say within the markets, and I want to go to Tim Stanovic here, but John, we have to say that as we have had this launch, we've had an adjustment in the 10-year yield to a lower yield. That is worth noting as we enter a Tuesday trading day.
Your 10-year yield right now, 113 on 10s, yields in about 5-6 basis points. For the broader market, your equity market around the opening bell, positive just 0.15% on the open, up 6 points. It's worth highlighting, Tom, that for many, many people, they do not like what they hear and what they see around this story this morning. As Emily points out, today that was a successful mission for this company. There are many people, though, that would like to see Jeff Bezos do a whole lot more on planet Earth than what he's just done in the last 1 hour.
Yeah, and one of the stark things here, folks, is almost like an athletic locker room. They're breaking out the champagne. For those of you on Bloomberg Radio, we can always describe a champagne moment. Tim Stanovic, that is one of the stark differences here between private enterprise. You wouldn't see that with a government NASA effort as well. I mean, we're really seeing a private enterprise. Tim Stanovic, where does it go from here?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It goes a lot of different places. For Blue Origin, they have 2 more of these flights later this year. They're shooting for late September, early October. Unclear, as we heard earlier, how much those are going to cost. The company has much, much bigger ambitions, though, beyond space tourism. Jeff Bezos has talked about his vision for the future. He said in the past that if we can get 1 trillion people, that's right, 1 trillion people into the solar system, that means we have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts. The idea is that the Earth cannot sustain us, and in order for materials, in order for energy, we have to explore further. You know, he was asked earlier this week about the idea that why focus on space when we have so many problems here at home? And his answer was, well, first of all, I think we can do both at the same time. And indeed, in recent years, he has increased his investments with his own philanthropy, but it is behind many other people of immense wealth. The other element of that is that he said it's always important for us to be exploring. It's always important for us to be looking ahead. And he says we can do both of those things at the same time.
I think it's right to sit on this conversation. Tom, you, like me, Emily, I'm sure as well, and Tim too. Over the last hour, we've built up to this moment this morning. For Blue Origin, a momentous occasion, truly historic. But for many people, the frustration, the amount of messages that I've received in the last 60 minutes criticizing not just this coverage, but the event itself. Emily Chang, just to go over the mission statement of Blue Origin that you and I discussed a little bit earlier this morning, I think it's worth sharing a couple of lines with our audience. Blue Origin believes that in order to preserve Earth, our home, for our grandchildren's grandchildren, we must go to space to tap its unlimited resources and energy. For Jeff Bezos and others, Emily, there is no distinction between the work that needs to be done on Earth and the work that he thinks needs to be done in space.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin, part of the opportunity here is for them to explain that vision. This has been a very secretive company for 21 years. Until today, only one journalist had ever visited Blue Origin headquarters. Today, they're open to the national press. We are all here watching this moment and wanting Jeff Bezos to articulate what that vision is. Why is he spending so much of his money exploring space for this 11-minute trip up and down? How does that help us on Earth? And what he has said is, I want to continue living on Earth. This is the best planet. We love it here, but we need to protect it. We're going to run out of energy. We need to go to space in order to mine that energy from the sun, from the moon. We don't need to go to Mars. Mars is inhospitable. We will not enjoy it there. We don't want to live on the moon either. We want to live on these space colonies, as he's described it, where it's like Maui every day, and you can go back and forth to Earth whenever you want. This is hundreds of years out, but he imagines big industry in space, residential and light industry here on Earth, and Blue Origin, he wants to be a huge part of the infrastructure in building out that space economy.
The eyes of the world on the desert land just outside of Van Horn, West Texas. Right now, 8:37 local time, 9:37 in New York, Tom. So allow me to check in on the markets just briefly. 7 minutes into the session. It has been a huge 24 hours for this market. Equities up by 1/3 of 1%. With your bounce back, this is what it looks like as follows. On the S&P 500, advancing just a little bit, 12, 13 points higher. But once again, Tom, it's the bond market that gets your attention. And maybe the bond market pales in comparison to what we've seen in the last hour or so. But your 10-year right now, just south of 114, Tom, down 5 basis points on the day.
I'm going to brag for the 108th mayor of New York and for Thomas Secundo when they did their innovation of inventing the Bloomberg terminal, John. It was absolutely original that you could go from what was called a Monroe trader to convexity and duration math, and then to immediate log analysis of charts. I can tell you, John, it was just like what you're watching with Mr. Bezos on the Texas desert. The 10-year yield right now, John, is a textbook chart of lower highs on yield. It has been 1, 2, 3, and on back over the last 15 days or so. It is stunning to see price up and yield down to a 1.1392. John, we have to begin to be on the 0.99 watch.
Unbelievable. For our audience worldwide on Bloomberg TV and radio, and of course for our audience on Bloomberg Quick Take, the coverage continues with Tom Keene, myself, Jonathan Ferro, alongside our good friends and colleagues Emily Chang and Tim Stenovic. We'll continue to cover the markets, but also this event. Tom, I talked about the late 90s and Amazon and the kind of people that threw mud at that company and its valuation. Why would this company be valued what it's valued when it's just an online bookseller without the vision of what this could become? And I'm conscious of that particular moment in the late 90s and conditioned by it because I do not want that clip to play in 20 years' time of me repeating that same error. Throwing mud at a mission that's taken place in the last hour without any imagination on what this momentum can develop, what this moment can develop into. Yes, Amazon had a crazy valuation, but it became something so much bigger than just an online bookseller. And you wonder if Jeff Bezos can repeat the act, Tom, with Blue Origin.
Well, it's a repeat the act, but it's a strategic plan to move forward. And again, they have that plan in Shepard, a single-engine rocket, which will be put on top of a larger rocket, and that will be called Glenn. Chad Anderson knows this with Space Capital and continues with his patient this morning at this historic moment. What's after Glenn? Does Jeff Bezos want to go to the moon?
He does. He's working with a consortium of, he's partnered up with a few of the incumbents and was competing for a contract that he lost out on to Musk and SpaceX. And they've fought against that, and it looks like they're going to press ahead. SpaceX was the only one that put in a bid that was affordable.
Frame this, and you're very good at this. Frame for this, now China doing a Matt Damon equivalency on Mars. We're out on Mars with a helicopter that goes around. There's government interest, there's international interest, there's private billionaire interest as well. How do they dovetail together in 2031?
Well, this is how so many new markets and nascent markets develop. The government is an early investor in the technology risk and in the R&D, and that's what we've seen over the last 50 or 60 years in space. And then with the retirement of the space shuttle, we were basically saying this has become routine, getting to orbit, and it's become too expensive. And in order to keep doing this, we need to work with commercial partners. And that's what, SpaceX 10 years ago was able to break through kind of the deadlock of the defense contractors who kind of had a tight grip on this market.
Yeah.
And they've lowered the prices. I mean, they are allowing NASA to do more with their limited budget, resupplying the space station, taking astronauts to the space station, maintaining station, and also going out to deeper space missions and exploring the solar system.
Let's get some final thoughts from our colleagues on the ground. Emily Chang, I want to come to you first, please.
John, you were asking about lunar ambitions, and what's so fascinating about this entire design process that has, of course, taken place over 21 years here at Blue Origin is they have built their future ambition going out hundreds of years into the design of the rocket that Jeff Bezos sat on today. The rocket is powered by hydrogen and oxygen, a very simple mixture. And on the moon, what do you find but water, hydrogen, and oxygen? So the idea is that once a rocket presumably lands on a moon, a Blue Origin rocket, they can turn what's on the moon into rocket fuel to get that rocket back to Earth, to power it through the space economy. And, what I would say is what we have witnessed today is nothing short of extraordinary. Sure, I know there are people out there who are unhappy with how Jeff Bezos is spending his time, but this is an incredible fleet. The birth of private space industry, the idea that we don't have to rely on governments to get to space, that private citizens can go there if they want to on their own craft. So this up and down suborbital mission, this is just the tip of a very long journey. It's orbital missions next, perhaps lunar missions after that, all building towards this future space ecosystem that Jeff Bezos has envisioned.
Emily, I know you've got to run. Where have you got to run to? You've got to go get an interview with Jeff Bezos, is that right?
I've got to go have a very important conversation, and we're going to get it back to you as fast as we possibly can.
I'm looking forward to that. Emily, you run away. It's been great to catch up. Thanks for your help this morning. Tim Stanovic, you've had problems with the audio all morning. I'm going to take another shot at this and give you a final word. Tim, are you there?
I'm here, and all is good here in Van Horn. When the New Shepard went up, it was silent here in Van Horn. I was able to see the trail left by the rocket motor as it exceeded hundreds of thousands of feet. One thing that I have been thinking a lot about, though, is what comes next. And we know what comes next for Blue Origin, but there's a lot that we don't know about what comes next. I mean, think about where we were 60 years ago after Shepard's journey into space. We didn't imagine that where we'd be sitting, we'd be able to do satellite technology that would allow me to be talking to you guys, or even potentially imagine that we could do global positioning systems so easily, or use global positioning systems to monitor climate change, or what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink, delivering internet to areas all over the world. The fact is even though these billionaires, these entrepreneurs, they do have these grand visions, the idea of what we could be seeing in the next 10, 20 years, we don't even know yet what that looks like.
Tim Stanovic, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it this morning from Van Horn, Texas. Right now, as we move forward, and again, this with an equity lift in the market up 228 points, and the bond market with those lower yields, we continue with one final discussion here on our moment in space, and that is the engineering of our many space programs. Daniel Wood is expert at this, director of Space-Enabled Research Group at MIT Media Lab, who dovetails a lot of social efforts and social policy into grunt engineering. And I say that, Danielle, with immense respect. There's that scene, Danielle, in Apollo 13 where they're going to die. And the three engineers are in mission control, and they got the canister, and they're going to purify the oxygen, or the astronauts are going to die, and they all pull out and sync their Kufel-Nasser slide rules. We are so far removed from the slide rules of a busted Apollo mission. What is the technology forward that we will see from this private enterprise?
It's wonderful to celebrate today. I'm so happy for Wally Funk and for somebody like her who's had such a long road to this road to space. And we can think about the technology by asking, what has been the road for all the companies? I was in college watching the Ansari X Prize. I want to appreciate Nisha Ansari, who helped fund some of the early investments by private companies, trying to demonstrate the ability to put a human into space through a suborbital mission several times in a row. And what we're seeing today, with multiple launches by private companies, is part of this long journey. There's also been a great coordination between government and private sector. I used to work for NASA, and NASA has within its congressional mandate something called the Space Act Agreement capability, meaning they can make agreements with organizations that are private sector organizations to share engineering knowledge and experience on spaceflight.
Professor Wood, you were at Kennedy Center, I'm sorry, it's Cape Canaveral, Professor, just so you know, for some of us that are of a certain age. You were an intern there, and I'm sure in your Orlando and your Central Florida, you were grilled, why are we doing this? Explain now, why are we doing this in 2021?
Everyone on Earth is benefiting from the investments that governments and the private sector are making in space. I travel all over the world, and I engage with leaders of countries in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia. Countries on every continent are investing in space infrastructure and are looking for ways for private companies to play a role in the space ecosystem, because space brings us many benefits through observing the environment, understanding and responding to climate change, managing our fragile coastlines, and also thinking about providing services. But even human spaceflight and microgravity research helps us transfer benefits from space back to Earth. We understand better how to recycle water, how to recycle air, and make ecosystems that are clean, whether they're artificial, but also on Earth. And we also understand better how our bodies and plants and animals respond in an environment like a microgravity, which explains their fundamental physics better. There's also the inspiration side. I am running a program at MIT called Zero Robotics, and we're inviting middle school students from around the country to learn about space robotics and how to code. And one day we hope to do this with the collaboration of the space station and expose them to the space station, which has been done before in the past. And so these opportunities inspire the next generation of leaders as well.
The great fear here is that will be a success for the elites. As you well know, we have two Americas. How do we translate technological innovation? How do we translate, as Brynjolfsson and McAfee talk about, the race against the machine? How do we translate this technology over to the have-nots, the technological have-nots of America?
I spend a lot of my time thinking about how we can do engineering design in a way that's equitable, advances environmental sustainability, and economic justice. This means first asking who's involved, ensuring that we have increased diversity and access to technology. It also means designing these space systems in a way that directly serves the needs of those who've experienced environmental injustice or long-term discrimination. It also means listening to groups like indigenous communities that have concerns, cultural questions about what humans do in space, for example, thinking of the moon as a sacred place. So there's a lot of ways we can use space technology to provide services, like disaster response, for example. And we can also then listen to those who usually don't have a strong chance to give their view on what we do in space. Because we're about to make some key decisions as a human race on how we treat the space environment. And I think we need more voices involved in this going forward.
Danielle, just a final word from you. You mentioned the public-private partnerships, and I think it's spot on to point that out. But for many of these efforts, they're increasingly privatized, and the gains will be shared with the shareholders. And I wonder your thoughts on that as we move away from strictly a government effort towards something much more highly privatized.
I think it's so important that we continue to see government infrastructure allowing services like research opportunities for universities, like internationally shared climate data that's important for everyone around the world. I hope that that becomes a public service that continues for years to come. There will also be private activities that kind of build on the government infrastructure. And I think it remains to be seen whether that's going to be only open to the elite. It is possible for private companies to consider how they can have business models that provide further openness to those who have less access or less ability to pay. But this is a choice that they need to make, and I hope they do make it.
Professor Wood, thank you so much for joining us with the MIT Media Lab, Danielle Wood, this morning. John, I think we've got to do a market check. We always need to do that with green on the screen, and we can use all the space innovation, John, to say, once again, I looked for a window of opportunity, and I missed it.
And you missed it.
Thank you.
42.87 on the S&P. We bounced back 0.7% after the choppiness we've seen in the last 24 hours. Here's one for you, though, Tom. Take a look at space. Take a look at Virgin Galactic and how it's trading this morning. It's down by 7.6% in early trading. Now, the leaders of these companies, when they're asked about the competition, they don't want to talk about the competition. They believe this is a joint effort to make steps and progress where we haven't made any progress for the last couple of decades. I think investors do see it slightly differently. A successful mission for Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic south of 30 at 29.90 and down 8%, Tom.
It's interesting to see. Chet Anderson with us with a final thought here. He has been more than patient. Space Capital's managing partner of the dovetail of all of this innovation, the NASA that we used to know and maybe the NASA that's still there, with where we're moving forward. And, you know, we've talked about the next steps of these people, but to John's point, does private enterprise and private competition get in the way of space success?
Absolutely not. It's driving it forward. We started off in a place where we had never been to space. Then we launched a satellite. Then we launched a human, and then we landed on the moon. And we've been regressing ever since. And it's only thanks to private efforts that we are now accelerating back into.
So what does NASA think of this event today?
I think they think very highly of this event, and they're very happy to see the success. Again, they're benefiting from this. They are going to now be able to rely on low-cost, innovative partners, leveraging reusability and enabling them to do more with their limited budgets. I mean, this hits on a few different notes. One, the inspiration front. Two, the competition. It's driving innovation forward. And three, we wouldn't have the capability that we have today without space technology.
Can these guys in Texas cowboy hats teach anybody at JPL anything? I'm serious. I mean, or at MIT, not the Media Lab at MIT, but MIT Aeronautics, the legacy of Harold Edgerton and the rest of it. Can they teach the pros anything?
It's a great question, and
it's my only good one today, so you better go with it.
100% yes, and they learn from each other. It's a symbiotic relationship. So NASA has a lot of heritage and a lot of great, embedded expertise. They've been there and they've done that. The private sector is challenging a lot of the embedded assumptions and doing things in new ways, allowing them to do things more effectively and more cost effectively.
Chad, just quickly, investable opportunities right now. Let's close right there. Is this a single name opportunity, or do you want to play the industry as a whole?
We've gone from a very limited market 10 years ago, handful of defense contractors on one side and the government on the other. There has now been $200 billion invested in over 1,500 unique space companies over the last 10 years. This is a massive market opportunity, cuts across the infrastructure, the distribution, and the applications of that satellite data in space technology stacks such as GPS, geospatial intelligence, and communications. This is a massive market opportunity that we're just on the forefront of.
I love asking that question and seeing an investor, Tom, lean in. Just lean in and give the pitch. Give the pitch. Chad Anderson there with the pitch. Space Capital managing partner. Chad, thank you for being with us through the last couple of hours. And as we wrap up our coverage, worth pointing out that there will be a news conference following the Blue Origin space flight. The news conference taking place with Jeff Bezos coming up at about 11 Eastern time on Bloomberg Television and on Bloomberg Radio. And I'm sure our colleagues over at Bloomberg Quick Take will be carrying that as well. Tom, before we go, we've talked about the degree of criticism we've had. We've talked about the degree of support that we've had. Let me allow the words of a Bloomberg Terminal subscriber to speak just for a moment. This got sent in moments ago, and I'd like to share it with our audience. Bezos and Musk are using their own money to do things where the US government has not made a lot of progress on in the last 20 to 40 years. This individual goes on to say, I grew up watching a moon landing as a young child. The space shuttle launched in Florida when in high school, and have a signed picture from Apollo 15, John Irwin, on my wall. People saying they should do more on Earth ignores the great advances in technology that pushing into space helped drive, and if nothing else, sparking the imagination of the world's youth to try things that haven't been done before. Now, if we say something has been successful today, Tom, just as far as that statement's concerned, I think the effort towards that, I think we've seen a success this morning.
Well, as Mr. Bezos said, I don't need to say it. Mr. Bezos can say it. We can do both. And that's always been the rationalization.
And they are trying to do both. For our audience worldwide, on Bloomberg Television, on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg Quick Take, that does it for our coverage right here. I want to turn to the price action and get you up to speed on what's going on in this market.
Oh, there you
Tom.
go, back to the boring market.
I've got to go there, Tom, come on.
Oh, it's your show, I forgot, excuse me.
My show's like a minute long today.
I'm over time.
Can you indulge me 60 seconds?
Please.
Can you let me do it? The S&P at 42.88. We advanced 30 points. We're up 0.7%. Tom, the Dow doesn't even make it into my show. I'm only doing this just for you. We're advancing how many points? It's an epic surge, up 400. We're up a little more than 1.2%. That needs an American accent, doesn't it? The Nasdaq up 40, advancing a third of 1%. But once again, Tom, it's the bond market that dominates the coverage this morning. Your 10-year comfortably below 120 at 160.
John, what I like is your Grand Bank's 48 is named Epic Surge. I just think that's great.
That does it for our coverage. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro. A special thanks to our colleagues Emily Chang and Tim Stanovic over at Bloomberg Quick Take. For our audience worldwide, from New York City with the eyes of the world, for the last couple of hours at least, very much on a small town in West Texas and the desert just outside of it. In Van Horn, congratulations to Jeff Bezos of Blue Origin. From New York, a successful launch, a successful touchdown back to Earth. This is Bloomberg.
Happening in the business world right now is how to get workers back to work and what benefits to give your employees. Microsoft is asking employees to be back in the office 51% of the time, but you're flexible about the rest of the time. Is that a permanent policy? And for those companies that are saying you have to be back in the office 100% of the time, are they on the wrong side of history?
I think we at Microsoft, we want to be much more data-driven. I also think that in time, if a year from now, we will have more sense of what the real structural change and needs and the expectations of both our employees and our customers are. And we'll really think about long-term policies based on, quite frankly, having all of that data behind us, because otherwise I think we're trying to come up and being too overly dogmatic when I think we need to be more experimental in our approach to return to work, because I do fundamentally believe the world's changed.
Up to Maine and had a lobster, and it's not as romantic as Lisa going to Greece.
Tom Keene says what?
You mentioned Maine and the lobsters up in Maine. Well, they can't compare to what you can see in Greece. Even better, I can't pronounce it. Astacoma carinata.
I nailed it.
It's not thera, whatever. Astacoma.
You're nailing it.
Carinata.
You're nailing it.
We're figuring out the hard stuff for you on Bloomberg Surveillance. Mornings on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Countries that entered this crisis with limited fiscal space, with more vulnerabilities, need to be supported for the benefit of the world.
The transparency of the debt burden for the poorest countries needs to be increased. There needs to be fuller disclosure.
Months after Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico is still in peril. Huge swaths of the island are still without power, running water, or access to medical care. Experts estimate that it will take years before these services are restored island-wide. Much of the blame has been placed on FEMA for a slow response in comparison to recent disasters on the mainland. But recovery from a disaster of this complexity and scale has proven more challenging than anyone anticipated. And filling the gaps between an overextended public sector and a suffering populace falls on the private citizens. Robert Anderson is a Puerto Rico resident of 4 years.
The eye of the storm came in south of El Yunque, swept up towards San Juan, and out to Arecibo. Everything on the right-hand side is what we call the dirty side of the storm.
This isn't his first time in a disaster zone. With a military and telecom background, Anderson worked on repairing damaged cell phone towers in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Some might be tempted to label him a disaster capitalist, seeking lucrative government contracts for his expertise. But as Anderson finds himself in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, he and his associates are developing a variety of pro bono recovery projects that target the island's hardest hit areas.
I see two Puerto Ricos. We're here in San Juan. They have telecommunications restored. They may or may not have power, but basic services are in place. They're able to get food. They're able to buy things. They're surviving. And when you look outside of the San Juan area, you can go 15 minutes from here and find areas that are devastated. I'm working on the devastated side.
Today, he's put together a boots-on-the-ground mission to provide medical care to some of the island's most isolated and vulnerable residents. Steve Berenbaum is one of Anderson's business associates. He offered an extra car and a set of hands.
So we received an initial report from a nurse that was out in the area. We're headed to the northeast region of Utuado for some people that are in need of urgent medical assistance.
Dr. Sally Priester is a physician from San Juan. She filled a van with medical supplies at her own expense and brought along a team of nurses. Google Maps estimated our first destination to be a 90-minute drive. But it didn't account for obstacles like this. Our first stop was the home of an 82-year-old blind Vietnam veteran. His roof was blown off by the storm, and he's been living alone in a back shed for nearly 2 months.
His cane actually got broken in the storm, so he's limited mobility. He has a number of medical ailments. Dr. Priester's having a look into him. We called the VA. They're going to get him set up with what he needs, get him stabilized so he can then be transported either to an evacuation center or off the island. It's when the chain gets broken, when those families that are connected to them leave the island or take off, these guys get left at the end of the road, and it's tough.
FEMA was not officially part of Robert's team, and their arrival caught everyone by surprise. Their job here was to survey and report back to their superiors, and did not come with medical aid of any kind.
People think that FEMA is there to hand out bottles of water, and it's not what they do. FEMA has a role to play. They have a very specific role. They bring in ships, they bring in airplanes, they bring in tractor trailers with pallets of things. But they're a big machine, and there's gaps in that thing. And you're seeing one of the gaps here, and we help fill that role. These guys are in a bad situation before, and now they're struggling for real basic things. One of the risks that you run is people going from fear to hopelessness. Those are the folks that we're trying to reach.
And how are they reached? How are they even found?
Word of mouth, mostly.
And what's your role in all of this?
Ghost in the machine. I'm lucky enough to be able to communicate with folks in FEMA, the state of Puerto Rico.
For a ghost, Robert makes his presence well known. Not only was he the de facto leader of the mission, now with FEMA in tow, he created his own maps to survey storm damage.
So we're right here.
And delivered them to FEMA HQ free of charge.
I have pretty good reach.
Perhaps that's how he managed to earn himself a coveted FEMA badge without actually working for them. And it's these relationships that allow him to operate more efficiently than an NGO or a government agency.
We're able to resolve problems at a different level.
Our next stop was on a mountaintop, a family of 11 struggling to care for their special needs brother in what was left of their house.
Probably we are the first health team to come and visit this family.
Muy bien, todo muy bien.
The patient has Down syndrome. He is all day in bed. The difficulty with this is the patient cannot be alone. The most important thing is that you need to take care of the chronic disease besides disability, because they have been not going to a doctor, and no doctor has come in here yet.
So we need a refill of this medication.
After maybe 54 days, it's not getting better. And the only way that you can be able to see that is coming to the ground, drive, and see the people and talk to the people.
You can see San Juan from here, but you can't get there. It's like the Emerald City.
On this stop, we caught word that a man living alone at the edge of the jungle was in need of care.
So we decided to take a little detour, come up here and check out and see what's going on. One of the challenges is to find those people that are at the end of these roads that need help.
¿Pero por qué estás solo? ¿Por qué estás por acá tan solo? I'm asking about why he's alone right here. He said things of life happens. Yeah, I'm here by myself. So ¿dónde vive acá? En la parte de...
This is not a job. To do this, you need to have passion for what you can do. You're not going to get paid.
It's said in disaster response and emergency response that the real first responders are your neighbors. You don't need to wait for a lucrative FEMA contract to go out and do good and to help the community.
In the end, do you feel like you're making a difference?
Lives you touch and people that you can affect. I don't really think about it in those terms.
But why do you do it?
It helps me sleep at night. I think it's as much for the people that are going out to help and do things as it is for the people that you affect.
Whether out of altruism, or the lure of a paid gig, or some mixture of the two, Anderson hopes to stay here to help shape Puerto Rico's future.
Puerto Rico's essentially been a colony for 400 years. It was treated poorly by the Spanish. It was not treated well by the United States when they first got here. Puerto Rico can continue in the way that it's always been, or Puerto Rico can rebuild itself like nothing that's ever been. And we have to do everything we can to make that real. That's the bottom line.
When I met him first online, I found him to be really sweet. I think I was the one who was talking for an hour. He was just listening.
When we met, I saw her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and kind, which was, something that I was looking for.
Anshu and Sumit are one of about 12 million couples that get married in India every year. Unlike their parents' generation, they're not from two close villages, but from two cities on opposite sides of the country. And their love didn't start through community matchmaking, marriage brokers, or classified ads in newspapers, but began online.
So we met through jeevansati.com. So it's basically an online portal where we have detailed profile of different grooms and brides.
It makes a lot of remote profiles who are located in distant areas more accessible.
Thanks to growing internet and smartphone usage, matrimony websites and apps in India are starting to disrupt the matchmaking industry. More and more people are finding their partners at the click of a mouse. jeevansati.com, where Anshu and Sumit met, is one of the biggest players. Young Indians looking for love set up profiles including their caste and horoscope, but their criteria for choosing spouses appears to be changing.
We have seen the shift from, traditional caste community conservative parameters to something like which is more focused on education, employment.
Anshu and Sumit's marriage was initiated by their parents, but modern Indian couples like them have more input than previous generations.
We looked up to them to agree for the proposal, but it was primarily our decision that we wanted to be with each other.
So what's the emoji you use the most to send to each other?
So there's a bear, which basically we use for indicating a hug.
Yeah, that's our language basically, bear icon for a hug.
Time flies when you're in love, and just 1.5 months after they first met online, the couple got engaged. They decided to hold their wedding less than 3 months later. But planning a traditional Hindu wedding on such short notice is no easy task. The massive event usually lasts 3 days, has various ceremonies and celebrations, and involves the entire two families and hundreds of guests. Luckily, there are websites and apps for that.
We searched online, we got in touch with Wedding Brigade, and they helped us finalize the venue. And it makes the search faster and efficient.
Startups like the Wedding Brigade are challenging traditional wedding planners in this $50 billion industry. It provides various services from booking banquet venues to buying wedding gowns. The website makes money by charging commission from vendors.
People don't want to be limited to what is available around them. They want to know the entire range of options available before making a decision. And now it's easy to find almost everything on one portal.
Anshu and Sumit are officially married in a ritual that has gone on for thousands of years, but their love started in a very new way. Technologies might be changing the way couples meet, date, and get married in India, but they're definitely not changing everything.
The technology was only the first level help that we could get to find each other. Everything else was like very humanly and emotions and feelings based.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has become a symbol of everything the Republican Party stands against.
Everyone gets a right to basic health care. We need strong oversight of these banks.
A legal scholar and a consumer advocate turned politician, Warren has branded herself as a champion of the working class and made a career out of standing up to big business. While rumors of a 2020 presidency bid remain just that,
I'm not running for president.
her Senate seat is up for re-election in 2018, and Republicans are already pumping millions into super PACs to defeat her. This is the story of how a law professor and politician came to be seen as the biggest threat to Republican values and the greatest hope for progressive America. Elizabeth Warren was born Elizabeth Ann Herron, the youngest of 3 siblings, on June 22, 1949 in Oklahoma City to middle-class parents. After waiting tables to help her family pay the bills, Warren became a star on the high school debate team. She landed a scholarship to George Washington University at the age of 16, but 2 years later dropped out to marry her high school sweetheart, Jim Warren. By 1980, Warren was a mother of 2, divorced and remarried, had earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Houston, a juris degree from Rutgers, and practicing law in New Jersey. Warren then went on to become an influential law professor, teaching, lecturing, and publishing highly cited work on bankruptcy and commercial law at 7 universities around the country, eventually settling at Harvard Law School. But Warren wasn't always a liberal lion.
Elizabeth Warren used to be a Republican, actually.
That's Stephen Dennis.
I'm a Senate reporter for Bloomberg. Around the time that Elizabeth Warren switched parties, she became a fierce opponent of a Republican drive to make it much harder to file for bankruptcy. She fought that for a decade. It ended up passing anyways.
While her efforts ultimately failed, her warning calls were heard in 2008.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis. Our entire economy is in danger, and without immediate action by Congress, America could slip into a financial panic, and a distressing scenario would unfold.
Professor Warren was tapped to help with oversight in the government bailout.
She would excoriate bankers and their bonuses and their practices.
Why should the U.S. taxpayer alone carry Citi?
She proposed a series of tough regulations, which became the basis for much of the Dodd-Frank financial law that we have today. That sort of catapulted her to national stardom, particularly among the progressive left.
Encouraged by her newfound notoriety, Warren declared her bid for the U.S. Senate on September 14, 2011. During the race, her opponent Scott Brown tried to derail Warren by accusing her of falsely claiming Native American heritage, a controversy that earned her the nickname Pocahontas. Nevertheless, she was victorious and won the Senate seat by a comfortable margin. She used her new tenure to challenge everyone, from banking regulators and Treasury officials to members of Wall Street and Congress.
I'm really concerned that too big to fail has become too big for trial. We need tough new laws to hold corporate executives personally accountable. No one should be above the law.
She called for Wells Fargo CEO John Stump to resign for fraud, introduced the Bank on Student Loans Fairness Act, and reintroduced the 21st Century Glass-Steagall Act. In 2016, after staying silent during the Democratic primary battle, Warren finally endorsed Hillary Clinton and had some harsh words for candidate Trump.
Donald Trump is a loud, nasty, thin-skinned fraud who has never risked anything for anyone, and that is just one of the many reasons he will never be president of the United States.
But she was wrong.
The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Warren wasted no time resisting Trump's agenda.
Have you ever managed or overseen a $1 trillion loan program?
I have not.
How about a $1 billion loan program?
I have not.
Okay.
In the Donald Trump era, Elizabeth Warren has been playing defense and trying to prevent Donald Trump and his cabinet appointees from rolling back protections that she helped enact.
Warren actually found herself rebuked by Mitch McConnell for reading a letter by Coretta Scott King about Jeff Sessions' record on racism during his confirmation.
She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
That moment became something that's on T-shirts, bumper stickers, slogans, and that really galvanized a lot of support for her. It's been very hard for Republicans to get much of anything done this year, and that's at least in part to this resistance movement that Elizabeth Warren has helped champion.
We are here to fight back.
Enough of Elizabeth Warren. Like you,
millions of dollars are being funneled to defeat Warren in the midterm elections in 2018. But it's the rumors of a 2020 presidential bid that has further prompted powerful donors to fund her opposition, often using the same playbook of constant and ruthless ad campaigns that many believe helped Trump win in 2016. It's anyone's guess if she will endure what Hillary could not.
You know, the question for Elizabeth Warren is whether she can go from being a liberal firebrand to somebody who can regularly get 60 votes for initiatives in the Senate and 218 in the House and drive an agenda, and whether she can bring together coalitions for political victories. That's the challenge, and we'll see what happens.
Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, has made some powerful opponents.
He doesn't know me, never met me, doesn't know what I'm all about. I think they're very rude statements, and frankly, tell him I will remember those statements.
My message to Donald Trump and his team is that, your views of Islam are ignorant.
He's the first Muslim mayor of a major Western capital and proud of it. This is how Sadiq Khan went from the son of Pakistani immigrants to a lawyer, lawmaker, and now the mayor of London. Khan's parents emigrated from Pakistan. His father was a bus driver, his mother a stay-at-home seamstress. The 10-strong Khan family squeezed into a 3-bedroom flat in South London. He wanted to be a dentist, but TV in the 1980s convinced him otherwise.
Objection!
LA law with its swagger and ill-fitting suits caught Khan's eye. He graduated in 1991 with a degree in law from North London University and joined a human rights firm. Khan worked a number of high-profile cases, often clashing with London's Metropolitan Police Force. But he had bigger political ambitions.
This is what being a new MP is like, squatting on a bench in the absence of an office, dealing with letters from constituents.
Reports are just coming in of an explosion here in London.
And there's just explosions, and then it was just smoke everywhere.
Everyone's just asking what's happened.
Only 2 months after Khan entered the Commons as a Member of Parliament, London was attacked by Islamist extremists.
That day will stay with me for the rest of my life.
He spoke out against the attacks both as a London MP and as a Muslim.
He has been very clear about his opposition to violence, opposition to terrorism, and has set out to make the case for a more open and peaceful Islam.
That's Thomas Penny, one of Bloomberg's Westminster correspondents.
Here is a man who is a Muslim, and he is standing up and being open and straightforward and being clear that the problem here is not Islam, but it's Islamic extremism.
In 2015, a decade after the attacks, Khan ran for mayor of London, and his faith was back in the headlines. His opponent, Zach Goldsmith, trying to link Khan to radical Islam.
The debate got again personal and nasty. The Goldsmith camp has called Khan extreme and accused him of associating with, quote, those who seek to do our police and capital harm.
It's a pattern of behaviour.
Even the former Prime Minister David Cameron repeated the allegations.
He shared a platform with Sajil Shahid, the man who trained the ringleader of the 7/7 attacks and accused the United States of bringing 9/11 on themselves.
But the smears didn't stick.
Zach Goldsmith ran a very negative campaign that was based on what people knew was a lie.
This election was not without controversy. And I'm so proud that London has today chosen hope over fear and unity over division.
After taking the mayor's office with a comfortable majority, Khan has brought a business-like efficiency to the role, scrapping expensive vanity projects like the Garden Bridge and the new Routemaster buses, which cost £350,000 each. The former lawyer who used to fight the police in court is now praised for his close relationship with them.
I was talking to a very senior police officer in the Metropolitan Police who said there was a sea change when he went into City Hall, and the police were saying how much they welcomed this because they knew where they stood and it was more straightforward to work with. So he works like a lawyer, he works like a government minister.
Khan's kept his faith at the fore. He's an outspoken voice for moderate Muslims across the world.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Now, by giving the impression that Islam and the West are incompatible, you're playing into the hands of the extremists.
The ongoing spat between Khan and US President Donald Trump escalated when Trump went after Khan, misquoting him on Twitter just hours after the terrorist attacks of June 3rd, 2017. Khan's now one of the most prominent Labour politicians in the UK. In fact, a recent poll of Londoners found Khan was more trusted to keep the country safe from terrorism than the Prime Minister or the Labour leader. His story of going from the son of an immigrant bus driver to the mayor of one of the greatest cities in the world plays well with Londoners. But can he appeal to the rest of the nation? Has Khan got his eye on the top job? And is the UK ready for a Muslim Prime Minister?
What does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hack emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning. He used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness.
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks!
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
When it debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for 5th generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
People think of Vladimir Putin, they think of capital P, power. And that's exactly the impression he creates. Whether it's physical power, firing different weapons, riding in various James Bond-esque modes of transportation, or tossing hapless opponents in judo. Or political power, ruling his own country with an iron fist, crushing his political opposition, or, most recently, being accused of meddling in foreign elections for his own benefit. This is how Vladimir Putin went from a poor, tough kid in Leningrad to a KGB spy to the very symbol of modern Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born in 1952 in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. His father was a factory foreman and his mother a homemaker. It is widely said that Putin's public-facing tough guy persona can be traced back to him getting into fights when he was younger, which paved the way for him to take up judo. After getting a law degree from Leningrad State University, Putin joined the KGB Foreign Intelligence Service. He spent 16 years in the KGB. When Putin returned to Russia, he began his political career.
He went to work for Anatoly Sobchak, who was the mayor of St. Petersburg.
That's Leonid Bershidsky.
I'm a columnist at Bloomberg View.
Putin thrived in Sobchak's administration because
he was sort of considered pretty efficient city official at that time. He was very loyal to Sobchak.
So loyal and efficient that
he was noticed by Yeltsin's close circle.
And those people soon brought Putin over to Moscow to work in Yeltsin's administration, where he quickly climbed the political ladder.
Then, of course, he was promoted to Prime Minister of Russia.
That's Dmitry Trenin.
I am currently director of the Carnegie Moscow Center.
Around this time, Yeltsin and the people around him, the so-called family, decided that Putin would become Yeltsin's successor. And then this happened. The apartment bombings were carried out in 3 Russian cities, killing 293 people and injuring more than 1,000. Putin immediately accused Chechen separatists for the bombings and followed it up with action.
He was credited with having a very successful military campaign against the terrorists.
And it worked.
After that, he became an heir apparent in the eyes of the Russian people.
3 months later, Yeltsin resigned. And on his way out, a famous exchange.
He was getting into the car in the Kremlin, and the last words that he addressed to Putin before getting into his car was, "Take good care of Russia."
So Putin took over as president, and 3 months after that, won his first election. But just because Putin won the presidency, that didn't mean he had all the power. This is Michael McFaul.
I was U.S. ambassador from 2012 to 2014. In the 1990s, there was a fire sale of all the things worth owning in Russia, and certain people,
the oligarchs,
did better than others in that fire sale, sometimes called privatization, and those people tended to be well connected with the Yeltsin regime, and they weren't Putin's friends. But they probably miscalculated, thinking that they could easily find a way to influence him. It became impossible almost from the start.
From that very moment, there was warfare between him and the oligarchs.
That's when Putin gave the oligarchs a choice. Putin's way?
Some of those people from the 90s managed to figure out a new way of dealing with Putin and have survived.
Or prison.
Others could not find common vision, and so they lost their assets.
Khodorkovsky once was Russia's richest person, worth $15 billion, but he ran afoul of President Vladimir Putin and spent a decade in prison.
With domestic power consolidated, Putin focused on restoring Russia's global influence.
Putin is the guy who believes in the expansionist Russian state. Georgia and Ukraine and all the other Soviet republics that split off when the Soviet Union fell apart, he still believes that they're traditional Russian satellites. A lot of his strategy is about keeping them in the orbit. That Yeltsin line, take good care of Russia, that's how he understands it.
And he used annexation and invasion, as well as oil, gas, and trade to keep former Soviet republics in Russia's orbit. In 2008, Putin's 2 terms were up, and he decided to step down as president. Dmitry Medvedev stepped in as president, and Putin went back to prime minister. But really,
Putin never left power. He pretty much continued running the country, and Medvedev was a bit of a figurehead.
There was actually a period of cooperation between Russia and the U.S. that benefited both countries during Medvedev's presidency.
Because Medvedev did not have the same negative attitude towards the West as Putin did.
But when Putin came back to run for a 3rd term, in the lead up to the 2012 election, it was widely believed that both the presidential and parliamentary elections were rigged, and Russians took to the streets. Putin blamed the protests squarely on America, and more specifically, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
He believed that she had sent, and this is his words, a signal to demonstrators.
Still, Putin won by a huge margin and set about crushing the protest movement immediately upon his return to the Kremlin. Over the next few years, Russia's economy tumbled. Putin annexed Crimea, leading to sanctions. The price of oil fell drastically. The ruble hit a new low, and America played down Russia's influence, with Obama calling Russia a regional power. Despite all of that, Putin's approval rating remained sky high, and then an opportunity for payback.
I think I'd get along very well with Vladimir Putin.
In 2016, there was one candidate who called Vladimir Putin very smart.
Trump exhibited tolerance towards Putin's actions annexing Crimea, and similar views on NATO and sanctions.
Secretary Clinton didn't support any of those views.
Even though Putin denies any wrongdoing,
U.S. elections.
Yes.
The
the U.S. has accused Russia of being behind the leaking of 20,000 Democratic National Committee emails, which many say helped Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the presidential election. Which leaves us here with the possibility of a President Putin until 2024, positioning Russia to be the world power he always imagined it should be.
Jack Ma is Asia's richest man and most recognizable business tycoon. He's the chairman of Alibaba, China's e-commerce giant and one of the 10 largest companies in the world. Yet he still wants more.
We know where we're going. We want to be the 5th largest economy.
Big words from the man some call Asia's Jeff Bezos. He's confident, he's charismatic, and he's definitely not the average CEO. This is how a poor school teacher went from the classroom to being one of the most influential multi-billionaires in the world. Ma was born in China's southeastern city Hangzhou in 1964. His parents were traditional musician storytellers. As a teenager, he started to learn English from foreign tourists after China opened up in the late 1970s.
And then for 9 years, Jack Ma hung around outside the Hangzhou Hotel, which is now called the Shangri-La. He would get up at 5 a.m. to talk to travelers.
That's Bloomberg technology reporter Lulu Chen.
And I cover China Internet for Bloomberg.
Ma failed China's National University entrance exam twice before being admitted to local teachers' college. He graduated in 1988. He applied for 30 jobs and got rejected, including from the fast food giant KFC.
When KFC came to China, come to us say, 24 people went for the job. 23 people were accepted. I was the only one guy.
Then Then Ma got a job at a local university and taught English there for about 5 years, earning just $15 a month. On the side, he started a translation company with several friends. During a company trip to the US in 1995, Ma had his first encounter with the internet at a friend's place in Seattle.
I searched the first word, beer. I don't know why, because it's easy to spell, baby. And I see beers from Germany, beers from USA, beers from Japan, but there's no beer from China.
So he searched for the word China instead and still couldn't find anything. And that got him thinking. He wanted to build something that would put China on the world's map.
He started China Pages, a Yellow Pages-like website, but it didn't take off. Then Ma joined a government agency in Beijing to help set up a website. By 1999, the internet stock boom had gripped Wall Street, and back in his Hangzhou apartment, Ma decided to try again. With his wife and a group of friends, Ma raised $80,000 and set up Alibaba, a site that allowed businesses to sell stuff to each other.
人家美国人强就强它的硬件，强就强它的系统建设，这方面确实比你早。但是玩信息玩软的，中国人的脑袋绝不比你们长。我们在座的所有人的脑袋绝不比你们长。
By 2000, Alibaba had raised $25 million from investors, including Goldman Sachs and SoftBank.
He had no business plan and zero revenue, but his eyes was very strong eyes.
In 2003, Alibaba started Taobao, a platform for individual sellers to trade with each other, and publicly declared war against eBay, who had started to make a foray into China.
Jack Ma has this famous saying that Alibaba is a crocodile in the Yangtze River, whereas eBay is a shark in the ocean. And if they fight eBay in the ocean, then they'll lose. But if they fight them in the Yangtze River, then they have a home base advantage.
In 2007, just 1 year after it forced eBay out of China, Alibaba debuted its business-facing division on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. But it delisted 5 years later as its performance sagged. But in 2014, Alibaba raised $25 billion in the world's biggest IPO in New York.
Everybody should have a dream. What if that dream comes true?
After achieving dominance in the business of e-commerce in China, Alibaba has been building an internet empire worth $472 billion, with businesses in cloud computing, online video streaming, movie production, healthcare, sports, retail, and even news media.
Alibaba buying into South China Morning Post really raised eyebrows. This is the largest English newspaper in Hong Kong, and it shows that Jack Ma's ambitions weren't limited to e-commerce. He wanted to influence not just Chinese users, but also overseas users as well.
The US has criticized Alibaba for allowing companies to sell counterfeit and poorly made goods, but in China, it enjoys the favor of China's government. It's part of Ma's company philosophy.
In love with the government, but don't marry with them.
Jack Ma's an extremely fortunate man for jumping on the internet sector so early. Note that this is a person who has no coding skills at all. He's a natural showman and a gifted public speaker and really able to convince others to believe in his vision.
Ma's vision of growing Alibaba to be the world's 5th largest economy faces strong competition at home and abroad. It will require more than just naked ambition and charisma, but Ma is great at getting himself in the right place at the right time. So far, it's served him well.
Peter Thiel is a walking contradiction. He got his bachelor's and Juris Doctorate from Stanford, but speaks out about the horrors of higher education, saying college is
as corrupt as the Catholic Church was 500 years ago.
He's a staunch supporter of the free press, yet he bankrolled a lawsuit to bankrupt an independent media company.
But these were not journalists.
And most of all, he's an immigrant and libertarian who's the most public supporter of Donald Trump in all of Silicon Valley.
What Trump represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away.
This is the story of how an openly gay, immigrant genius, libertarian billionaire went from tech contrarian to Silicon Valley's biggest Trump supporter. Peter Thiel was born on October 11, 1967 in Frankfurt, West Germany, to Suzanne and Klaus Thiel. Peter's family emigrated to Cleveland, Ohio when he was 1. An Ayn Rand devotee during his youth, Thiel attended Stanford University majoring in philosophy.
His Stanford experience shaped a really big part of who he decided to surround himself with.
That's Lizette Chapman.
And I cover technology and venture capital here at Bloomberg.
He and his Stanford friends made their first big splash in tech with PayPal. After selling to eBay for $1.5 billion, they would become known as the PayPal Mafia for each incredible success after PayPal. For Thiel, that began with an early, modest $500,000 investment in Facebook.
And in VC speak, early means big risk, but also big reward. He turned that initial $500,000 investment into more than $1 billion in cash.
But Thiel was just getting started with Facebook, and he went on to make a whole bunch of wildly successful investments.
From SpaceX to Airbnb to one of the largest, most powerful companies in the United States, if not the world, and of course that's Palantir.
The incredibly controversial secretive data mining startup he founded with his colleagues from PayPal. It connects data silos and then allows non-technical people to search that information for patterns. Data like
financial information, feeds from video cameras, biometric details, passport information, flight manifest.
Palantir doesn't talk much about how they collect this data, who has access to it, or what they do with it. But they have contracts with
the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And several other federal agencies. It's the richest company you've never heard of, valued at $20 billion. But there are plenty of obscenely wealthy people in Silicon Valley. What makes him different...
He's a complex ball of multiple contradictions.
Take college, for example. Even though college was extremely important for Thiel, there's something called the Thiel Fellowship.
In exchange for dropping out and a promise not to pursue college, Thiel would give them $100,000 each.
You basically tell people that if you get a diploma, you're saved. Otherwise you go to hell. You go to Yale or you go to jail.
Also, his relationship with the press.
Here's another contradiction. He's donated to free press initiatives, including the Committee to Protect Journalists.
But he also secretly spent tens of millions of dollars bankrolling a lawsuit filed by Hulk Hogan over the publication of a sex tape and bankrupting the independently run Gawker Media. Why did he do this? Because in 2007, one of Gawker Media's blogs, ValueAg, outed him as gay. And with the lawsuit, he
found an opportunity to get back at them by funding the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan was able to bring then, but he wouldn't have been able to do that without Thiel's money.
And finally, Thiel's biggest contradiction, his endorsement of Donald Trump.
When he was asked about his support for Trump, he was surprised at the outrage that came with it from many of his colleagues in Silicon Valley. He didn't want more of the establishment.
No matter how crazy this election seems, it is less crazy than the condition of our country.
After briefly supporting Carly Fiorina in the primaries, Thiel pivoted to Trump, donating $1.25 million to Trump and his associated super PACs in October 2016. And he didn't just help Trump financially. He gave a full-throated keynote speech supporting Trump at the Republican National Convention.
I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
And when Trump was finally elected, Thiel was given the reins to an enormous amount of power.
And I want to thank you, man. You have a very special guy.
He was named the transitional advisor. And in that role, he did a lot of interviewing and a lot of vetting to fill hundreds of cabinet positions and different jobs within the administration.
But it turns out Thiel's support isn't unconditional.
Talking to people who spend time with him, I have also heard that he is no longer a great supporter of Trump.
It was reported that Thiel was unhappy with the direction of Trump's presidency. Ever since, he's been mum, making no public appearances, no statements, and staying out of the spotlight altogether. Although there have been suggestions that Trump could tap Thiel for a top intelligence post or ambassadorship, there's no indication he'd accept.
He's described his relationship with politics as schizophrenic. He gets really involved, and then he runs away as fast as possible.
Whether Thiel takes a new position or simply continues as a board director at Facebook and Palantir, at just 50 years old, he's primed to wield some serious influence in technology and politics for decades to come.
Two 2016 was again the hottest year on record, and the previous 17 years have seen our 16 most scorching. Scientists overwhelmingly agree. Global warming is the culprit. And it's just getting started. Ice caps, extreme weather, wildfires, droughts, and the hits keep coming. What are we doing about it? In 2015, the world took its boldest step yet to stem climate change with a historic accord in Paris. But now comes the hard part. Nations must change energy policies and invest huge amounts of money, and they will likely do it without the United States. President Donald Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would withdraw from the accord.
The reality is that withdrawing is in America's economic interest and won't matter much to the climate.
Here's the situation. Decades in the making, the Paris Agreement united the U.S., China, and more than 190 other nations in a push to limit fossil fuel pollution. The UN-sponsored plan secured pledges to cut greenhouse gases, the emissions that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, in an effort to avoid the rising seas and other environmental disasters that climate models predict. But even if all pledges are met, the globe is expected to warm by as much as 3.4 degrees Celsius this century, more than the UN target of well below 2 degrees. Meeting the Paris Agreement means that governments will have to offer more incentives for clean energy, scale back support for fossil fuels, make emissions more costly, and reduce deforestation. It's estimated that the deal will require $13.5 trillion of spending through 2030. Here's the argument. Unlike past climate pacts such as the Kyoto Protocol, each country set its own Paris targets and then promised to revisit and improve them. The U.S. was primed to play a lead role in climate change, but Trump's Energy Independence Executive Order reverses Obama-era rules and directives put in place to combat climate change, and expands production of coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel. The resulting policies threaten the global fight against climate change. Without the U.S. commitment to emissions reduction, other countries may join it in abandoning the Paris Agreement. This could make it almost impossible and even more expensive down the line to stop climate change. Optimists argue that the shift to a lower carbon future is already underway. Businesses, cities, and U.S. states, such as California, are already investing in wind and solar and taking other steps to make it work.
I've actually been called an environmentalist, if you can believe that.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. origins of the creative content of a lot of the work at Lightbright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch. Some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file. And we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes our guide for what we're going to bend the neon to. We take from the office into the glass shop. We pick out the right size tubing with the right color for the right size project. From there, we heat up the glass tubing. The torches heat the glass well in excess of 1,000 degrees in order for it to get into its molten state. We heat up and bend the glass tubing to match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, and we can control the pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. After we've bent various components, we have to go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics. Going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water and salt that's heated to your body temperature, and it allows for all sort of external stimulation to fall away. And your internal world really begins to bubble up and manifest. You really get to experience a different relationship to your mind. I think I work with neon because I can't not work with it. It's so challenging and so rewarding. And those things are so intertwined that there's no way of separating it out. I learn so much and continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is opened, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it. And we seal the tube off, sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. I think my favorite part of making a neon light is when I see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits a different wavelength. we bring it over to the aging table, where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
bit like an addiction. You've got to make something. You have to do something. It's borderline obsession. And every bike we build is my favourite bike at the time, and as soon as it's done, I want to build another one. It's Mercedes-Benz cycles is something I've been thinking about ever since I started cycling in my late teens. We want bikes that ultimately you'll really enjoy riding. There's never a bike that's the same. There's always a slight change. And as we build them individually as well, they have the marks of a bike that's built by hand. Most people I know cycle have an idea of their dream bicycle. And it may be an evolving idea you've had in your head. And we've worked with a lot of people that have come to us with sketches and scrapbooks. It's really, really nice to build something that's just one-off and unique. I think a lot of people see a bicycle as two wheels and a frame in the middle. There are a lot of subtle changes and nuances in design which can change the riding characteristics quite dramatically. I'm a really big fan of modernist architecture, and the simplicity of a modernist building is really hard to achieve. And with some of our bikes, they may look very simple, but I think people should not underestimate the time and effort that goes into designing a product. Tubing is key to a bike's feel and ride. Reynolds tubing has been in my life ever since I can remember. Growing up, I could never afford a frame manufactured with their tubing. We can now put a badge on our bike saying manufactured Reynolds, which is a sort of thing as a kid I just wouldn't have believed was going to happen. Every part of the bike has a specific tube. It's not universal. The first thing we do is get the tubes out, check they're correct, check the wall thicknesses, sand the edges, make sure it's all really clean, because if it's not clean, the tubes won't join together correctly. We build in steel because I still believe it's one of the best materials to use. It's been used in bikes since the late 1800s, and they're still using it now for a very good reason. It's the flexibility that we can replace the tube, repaint the bike, and you wouldn't know it's damaged. I just like working with it. It's very sculptural. This isn't sort of aerospace precision engineering. It's a steel rule and a marker. So when we're cutting the tubes, it's within a mil or two. But what we're trying to do is take the best from bicycle building in the past and add a little bit of modern flair to it. There's various techniques for building bicycles. We do a thing called fillet brazing, where you connect a pipe together. We use a bronze rod and a flame. We heat the tubes up to the same temperature and we fill the joint with bronze. And it gives a very, very sort of fluid, lovely, sort of quite sculptural feel. You've got to practice. You've got to be able to judge material temperatures. You've got to just look at it and you just get a feel for it. It's a stage where your tubes start to look a bit like a bicycle. My father's a jeweller. He'd make sort of very pretty things, which are lovely, but for me, they don't really have any function. What I love about bicycles, you can start on a Monday with a box of tubes. You can be riding it by the weekend, and it can last you for the rest of your life. Outside of the frame and forks, the other most important part is the wheels and tyres. When you build the wheels, you have to lace them, so there's little holes going all the way around the rim. You poke the spoke through. We do build all our wheels by hand here because a machine can't get 30 years worth of wheel building experience. Colour is very, very personal. With any of our bikes, you can have them painted whatever colour you want. We've matched one to a teapot, so we can get that scanned and we can match that, or someone's favourite item of clothing. I like to let the bike sit for 4 or 5 days minimum, just so the paint can have time to cure a little bit, and then we assemble it. We get out all the new components, and it's a case of putting them together. Some bikes you can assemble in 3 hours, some will take 3 days. And we've built bikes that cost in the £10,000 plus mark. Some people, they're saving up and this is their bike and they're going to own it for the rest of their lives. So we just want to make sure they get the right thing. I think the bike for me was the first time I had some freedom. So as soon as I had one, I was off. A lot of people still get that thrill as when they were a kid blasting down a hill, wind going through their hair. It's fun. Everyone has their favourite jacket or something that just makes them feel good. If you've got a bike that fits well, you actually feel part of it. Building bicycles as a creative outlet is fantastic. It's not something you do because you're going to get a big paycheck at the end of the day. You do it something you have a passion for it.
If you ever saw a wooden surfboard, it was probably hanging in somebody's house or underneath the deck. But kind of in the last 10 or 15 years, wood has made a big comeback. They surf wonderfully. It's beautiful and it feels great to be on one of them. I always had a love for wood and kind of passionate about things that went in the water. I've kind of been around wooden boats most of my life. There's just so much character. The way they're built, the stories that come with them, a lot of that has translated over to why we build surfboards the way we do. When we first started thinking about building surfboards, wood was the natural material we chose. They have a very high strength to weight ratio. Wooden surfboards have the longest history of use in the surf world than any other material. People have been surfing wooden surfboards since kind of the first documented history of people riding waves. The board starts in CAD, where we take a 3D model, break down the shape, and kind of create frames and templates and all the inner parts of the board that we get cut on a CNC machine. We take those frames and we just pop them out, assemble the frame into kind of a skeleton. We go out to our lumber shed, pick a bunch of cedar, and bring them into our mill shop, put glue along the edges, clamp it all together into a panel. Everything's book matched, you have symmetry in the colors and texture of the wood. Cut your outline. Take our assembled frame, gently put it down right on top of the plank. Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together. Every piece of wood is going to be different, and it's all going to react differently. There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one of the things that keeps it challenging. You learn to read the kind of what the grain lines are doing and what the color of the wood is telling you. Once those rails are cleaned up, we put our top planks on. It's a little bit like putting a lid on a box. It's like, this is it. Whatever's inside that board is staying inside that board. And by tensioning some rope, you can clamp the two together. It's like a time capsule.